Another reason why I have a big problem with the Democrats and their caucuses and convention, they have what are called gender quotas and also racial quotas. And for that matter, I'm sure they have a quota for Muslims and Somalians, because basically any group is entitled to a kind of proportional representation. And what this does is knock the people who generally will go down there and try to be a delegate. You can't be a delegate because you're knocked off because of your race or your gender and other characteristics like that. So it just becomes just a crazy, I mean, it totally discredits the caucus process. It's really a farce. And this is something I've taken to the U.S. Supreme Court and has been tried in the federal court with Michael Davis, who I don't think did a very good job at all on it. Basically,
the judge.
Yeah, the judge. I'm sorry. He just wrote down. He's supposed to be the judge, but he just basically wrote down what Lori Swanson's attorney told him to write down, Nathan Hartshorn.
Oh, okay.
And he said, well, you know, the parties aren't governed by the Constitution, even though right in their own constitutions they say they are governed by the Constitution, but they're supposed to be this free private organization. And what's funny about that,
they're not governed by the Constitution, of the United States or their own
of
Constitution?
Of the United States.
Okay.
But it says right in their state Democrat Constitution that they are.
They are.
But they're not. And they go in and argue that they're a private association and that however they select their and this isn't
they
true.
Are.
Well,
they are, but when your documents say the Constitution, U.S. Constitution applies, then that takes away that argument.
And actually it does apply. So you go back to a case, I believe is Allwright versus, it's a Texas case of Allwright where they had an all-white primary. And they say, well, we're a private organization. We can have an all-white primary because they're not actually electing a senator. And the U.S. Supreme Court said no, because that's the integral machinery of the election. And you're putting someone with a straight shot to the Senate, and you can't do that by excluding anybody but whites. And so they are governed by the Constitution.
Wow.
So yeah, so for that reason I don't like to appear there either, and that's why I first went to the Independence Party, because I knew I couldn't walk in there and argue against a gender quota. This is what Amy Klobuchar gets. I mean, half of the delegates, at least, have to be women. And most of them are there so they can elect Amy Klobuchar as the first woman. And I've actually been to one of these precinct caucuses. A friend sent me one time, who was a minority, by the way. He had health issues. And at the end of the precinct caucus, the leaders stood up and said, you know, we have this law in Minnesota and in the Democratic Party that half the delegates have to be women. And I look around at the delegates, and we don't have half women. So I'm going to ask you if your friend will get off the voting delegation and be an alternate so that we can put a woman in his place.
Right.
And I objected to that. And
wow.
But then she said, oh, he's a minority because he was Hispanic. So, well, he's a minority, that's okay. And she moved on, and she knocked all these men off the ballot. So I've presented this in the court, and this is another problem that I have about going in and giving any credibility to these caucuses and conventions.
So you could be elected you can't even get on the ballot, is what you're saying, to be elected a delegate. Based on their restrictions.
Right, you can't
Or once you get elected,
they
can go and knock you off because the quotas haven't been met, even though the people voted for you.
And yeah, exactly. And by the way, this goes all the way to the DNC. So if you look at the 2016 DNC rules, it said every state in the country has to come up with these numbers. So if you go to California, their laws, Democratic Constitution, say 26% had to be Hispanic. So of the people who were voting in the California State Convention, 12% had to be homosexual, and so that's 36%. The black percentage was only 11%, and of course the women had to be 50%. So when you get down to white males, you're talking, in that case, you're talking about 15–20% can be white males. So how can you govern the country if you can't go to the convention and nominate people for federal office? So the Democratic Party is in a big mess, and I've been taking this to the U.S. Supreme Court.
is interesting. Well, so where's that in the process right now? How
Well, let
how
me put
far?
it. Let me put it this way. During this time, when I was on my way to the Supreme Court, I found out that they had taken away my wife's breast cancer
Okay.
treatment, and so that had to be the number one
Yeah.
thing. The world just changed. Every
Right.
time you get into these cancer situations, your world changes, because the number one
Exactly.
priority is to get the best treatment for that person and pray that they make it through. And our prayers were answered, but I did not. Now that particular case, though, I took to the Supreme Court in 2014, but I
Okay.
didn't take anything back again in 2016.
Okay.
But in 2014, they thought it was pretty funny, I guess, out of the Supreme Court. They ruled it out, and they said it's frivolous, and to suggest that people have to follow the Constitution, that they can't be ordered by race and identity, and they wouldn't even give it a hearing.
Okay.
It did go through the Eighth Circuit, and there's been some interesting argumentation, but fundamentally is what Judge Michael Davis said, is that he accepts the argument that the party's not governed by the Constitution, and so you can't make an argument that
Okay.
I have constitutional rights not to
Sure.
be discriminated against by
Sure.
the rules. Now, I'm not talking about what people vote for,
Right.
exactly what you
Right.
said. But once I get on there, they can just say, whoops, the law says we can only have so many white men, so you're going to have to get off. You know, so
Okay.
he thinks that's okay.
Well, okay. That's
We should all fight
just a
that.
violation of their own documents.
And that's one thing
Well,
I'm bringing up and running against Amy Klobuchar.
You bring up Nathan Hartshorn's name, and I forgot to mention this. April 25th, down in Ramsey County District Court, there is a Minnesota Voters Alliance versus Minnesota Secretary of State's office for getting data, voting data. And so what's happened is Nathan Hartshorn is the attorney representing Steve Simon, or the state of Minnesota in this case, and he had a motion to dismiss. That went away. I mean, the judge says, no, that doesn't count. We've got some issues here. So we're going to have a hearing. So the hearing is now May 25th. Judge Frisch, and I do have permission to film that. So I sent my request in, got it the next day. And they're just thrilled down at the court media services that these things are getting filmed. Any court case that they get filmed, they're thrilled because they want to see that transparency in our government. I'm thrilled too, because it just doesn't happen. You film in district court. But you bring up Nathan Hartshorn's name.
That's great that you're able to do that.